I'd like to welcome all of you to this session, which is entitled Towards an Accessible Internet for People with Disabilities. The format of this particular workshop is as follows. We have four panelists with us today. The first is Gunela Astbrink, who is one of the organizers of this workshop, together with some of us. She is in Australia and she's trying to connect from there. So we are hoping that she'll be able to come in. In fact, she wanted to speak first because she was kind of introducing the topic as a person who has been working for long with people with disabilities. The other speakers that are there with me today are Arun, Dipendra and Sunil, who will be speaking to us on various aspects of working with people with disabilities in the context of an accessible internet. So we will first see if Gunela can join us and make her statement in about 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay, I will start, and I'm just wondering if my slides can be loaded, please. Is that possible? In case they can't be, and in the interest of time, I will start my presentation, and hopefully they can be loaded as we go along. Look, thank you very much, and it's a real shame I can't be there in person. I was sincerely hoping to, but I'm delighted to be presenting at this APrIGF. So am I? I'm hoping that I'm on. Oh, great. In the background, you'll see I have a little piece of the Pacific from the Papua New Guinea. So Paul Wilson mentioned that there's not so much Pacific participation. Anyway, this workshop came about after discussion in last year's APrIGF about topics that are covered at the global IGF but may not be discussed so much at the regional level. And so Satish and I talked about organizing this workshop. And I heard with interest at the opening address about the internet being available in future to villages throughout India, which is really exciting. And the theme is an equitable internet. So certainly disability and accessibility are key components of an equitable internet. So when we talk about disability, we need to be clear on what we mean. We're talking about people with vision loss and blindness, and we'll be hearing about that from Dipendra, and people with hearing loss and deafness, and we'll also be hearing from Arun about deaf-blindness issues. And then, of course, people with physical disabilities are a key area of disability, and people with intellectual disability and people with mental illness. So we often think about it from the point of view of vision loss, hearing loss, and physical disability, but intellectual disability and mental illness need to be taken into account here. And there are particular issues when it comes to the use of the internet and the benefits of the internet for people with all of these different disabilities. And when we look at the statistics of disability, according to the World Health Organization in 2010, their report states that about 15% of the world's population has a disability, and we're talking about 1 billion people. There's a high proportion in the Asia-Pacific region, and of course in India. We are talking about a very large number of people. 80% live in developing countries. So again, this is an issue that is very relevant for this particular region. Now, Disability can be looked at a number of different ways. The medical model needs to be fixed, and sure, there's a lot that can be done medically, but the person is blind, that's it really, and there, and in other cases of disability, we need to look at the social model, which is the community needs to reduce barriers to include people with disability so that everyone can participate with communication, employment, in the community, where the internet plays a very important role. Inclusive design is something that really assists in this process, designing for the whole community. An example is programs on streets for wheelchair users, delivery carts and prams. So those ramps, while they may have been designed for wheelchair users, are real benefit for people who are pushing prams or delivery carts or other weird appliances. Now, electronic programs can be things like accessible websites and apps, and we'll be hearing about that. Hardware and software mobile phones. Mobile phones can be designed in a way so that they are accessible right from the start, and often the Apple iPhone is used as an example here for people who, for example, are blind. But we must not forget the role of assistive technologies, where there are no solutions that might meet the needs of a particular group. So let's look at it from a policy perspective. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This has been signed and ratified by over 100 countries, and a large number of those happen to be in this particular region. Now, there's a lot of different obligations, and under this convention, and one of them, which is very relevant here, is implementing measures to design, develop, produce, and distribute accessible ICT at an early stage. So these become accessible at minimum cost for people with disabilities. So we're looking at affordability, we're looking at availability, and obviously accessibility. And this comes from Article 9 on accessibility, and you have the URL. And as another policy area, the Internet Society has as its vision, the Internet is for everyone. Now, everyone should really mean everyone in the community. A policy paper which I was privileged to draft called The Internet Use by Persons with Disabilities Moving Forward, which was a paper that covered a whole lot of topics about the business case for accessibility, how everyone can be involved in improving accessibility to the Internet. And most recently, Net Mundial, that landmark meeting in Brazil, produced the Net Mundial multi-stakeholder statement of Sao Paulo. And there were a lot of very important human rights principles for Internet governance. And one of those related to disability, and it states, accessibility, persons with disabilities should enjoy full access to online resources, promote the design, development, production and distribution of accessible information, technologies and systems on the Internet. So we have these sort of statements coming out that very much relate to Internet governance. So that really is a very, very brief overview. I probably would have gone into a little bit more detail, but because of the time factor, I look forward to participating on the panel and hearing the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're back. So thank you, Gunela, and sorry for the glitches. You have raised some of the very basic issues that the people with disabilities are facing. I'll pass on to the next panelist before we have an open discussion. So it's now over to Arun Mehta.
Thank you. Could I have my slides up, please? Hi, my name is Arun Mehta. I am the president of BAPSI, the Bidirectional Access Promotion Society. Our concern is those who fall between the cracks. A lot of technology has been developed for persons with blindness, for persons with motor disabilities. But if you have multiple disabilities, then there is surprisingly little. And so we have decided to focus on this. I'll only mention this. We've done a lot of work relating to persons with cognitive disabilities, and at previous meetings of the Internet Governance Forum, I've had the privilege of talking about that. But if you go to our website, skid.org.in, you're not able to find my slides? Shall I give you I have it on stick. You have? Okay. Uploading. Okay. So we basically, around Ruby on Rails, we have set up a platform where it's very easy to develop fresh software based on individual requirements. You see, we believe that engineers sometimes need to work the way doctors do. That you're dealing with people one at a time, not that you develop a piece of software and expect 1 million people to be able to use it. So we created a platform where this was easy to do, where we could easily train students to do the same. And that's how we are able to do free software in a country with very little support, because students work for us in summer vacations free. What I would like to talk about here is about the work that we are doing with the deafblind. This is something that emanated from the Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability at the Internet Governance Forum, where we started to ask ourselves, who are the people who are not here? You know, we have deaf people as part of our DCAD, blind people like Dipendra have been very active contributors. Wheelchair-based people like Shadi have also been active. But multiple disabilities we didn't see. So Fernando and I had a discussion. Fernando is a blind person from Brazil, that the deaf-blind can be reached through the vibrate on the phone. And I got a student to start working on it. And we very soon had some software which used Morse code on the vibrate for the deaf-blind to communicate. But guess what? There wasn't a single deaf-blind person who was ready to start using it. So we really needed to look at the problem a lot better. And so we were very fortunate in getting support from the ISIF, the Information Society Innovation Fund, ISIF Asia, which is administered by APrIGF. And they are very, very agile and flexible when it comes to small sums of money. Very often, an NGO like ours needs a small amount of money. So if you want a large amount of money, there are plenty of funders you can go to. But if you want a small amount of money, you have to go through the same rigmarole with them, and that's not worth it. So this is specifically designed for people like us who are happy in the work that they do, but sometimes they have a project that needs a lot more work than they anticipated. And the deafblind is something like that. We can develop software. What we cannot do is go into the deafblind community, do workshops and things like that. That takes a lot of effort and money, and so we were very happy for this help. Now, what also made it, if you can go to the, no, I think we've gone too far on the slides. Can we just go back a little, please? Yeah, the next one after this. After the phone becomes smart. The other thing that made it easy for us to start doing apps on Android phones is that it has become incredibly easy to write these apps now. It used to be a lot harder. I've been writing software for many decades now. It's amazing how simple it has become to write simple apps, and I would like to simply demonstrate this. Now we have actually, as part of the ISIF grant, the work that we have done, we've developed 2 apps. Both of these are available on Google Play. The first one that I will talk about is something called Tell My Phone. This is designed for old people basically who have low vision and are deaf. This is very common among old people, sadly. So this is an app which which basically, where basically what you have to do is you rotate the phone. Oops. Hello. Sorry. Let me try again. What is your name? Can you read from wherever you are? So even a person with low vision can use this to communicate. And I've been using this in English. You can also use this in Hindi. Now, if you can just go to the next slide, please. This doesn't seem to have a picture there, but never mind. Go to the next slide anyway. You don't have the graphics. It's just the text. Well, I'm very sorry, but you don't have this particular graphic. But on this graphic, what you were supposed to be seeing is the source code for this app that I just showed you. And this is just, it's like, if you're doing Lego, it's like sticking 4 or 5 bricks together. So this is a very, very simple app. It gets written in less than 5 minutes. And what it is doing is it's doing sophisticated speech recognition and everything. But you as a programmer don't have to know how to do all that. There are just the simple modules like Lego bricks that you plug in and you can start making your app. Okay, now I'm glad at least I was able to demonstrate this to you on the phone, and maybe I can show you the source code. If you wish, you can talk to me later. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so now the latest app that we have done, what we discovered very sadly was that hardly any deaf-blind person in this country learns ABCD. I mean, to get to a point where you get even basic literacy is huge for a deaf-blind person. So, what deaf-blind children, for example, struggle with basic concepts such as mom and dad. I mean, imagine that the teachers have to spend a lot of time explaining to the child what is mom, what is dad, and what the difference is. Learning how to read time and to tell time takes a long time and things like that. So our focus has been now on writing apps that would work for pre-literate persons, people who have not yet learned how to read and write. And so the best place to start is with children, and when you're working with children, the natural thing when it comes to communication is a slate. Now, this normal slate that all of us grew up with is not accessible to a person who's blind. So the software that we wrote lets you draw with your finger, and you can sense what you have drawn by vibration. When you, I can just quickly show that to you, but the vibration is something sadly that I can't show you. But let me just try. Okay, to draw, I can do this, and when you just run your finger over this, and I'll pass it to my co-panelist. When you just run your finger over this, you can sense that when your finger is over black, the phone is vibrating. So you can sense what you have drawn with your finger and the vibrate, even if you are a blind person or a deaf blind person. Now this has just gone up onto the App Store about 2 days ago, and in the course of this week we are going to be doing workshops at the Helen Keller Institute for the Deaf and Deafblind with deafblind people to see how well solutions like this work. So what I wanted to, okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Again, sadly, we have a screenshot that you can't see, but I've already shown you the thing here live, so that's okay. Move to the next slide, please. All right. So now what basically, and this is the key that that I hope you will take with you from this talk, and that is that the development of technology is not enough. Now, we kind of knew that. But we are actually going through the painful process of figuring out exactly what it is that you need to do to introduce technology in a case like this. So we have written the software. We are going to be conducting workshops in Morse code. We will be providing the school with phones so that, in order to conduct the workshops and so on. Now, so really, I mean, there is a lot of effort that, so writing the app is actually, you might say, the easy part. The tough part is really trying to see how to get that in. So what we are on, so on the one hand, at the Helen Keller Institute, we are able to target our intervention at a very, very strategic place. The Helen Keller Institute trains trainers of deaf-blind people, one of the few places in the country that does so. And we will be interacting with the faculty at the Helen Keller Institute, one of whom is deaf-blind. And so hoping that in this way, the interventions that we are introducing will over a period of time make their way into the community. I hope in future meetings that I'll be able to report a little bit on how we were able to take this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arun, for that excellent presentation on the different tools and technologies that are being developed today. We will have a question and answer session towards the end of the session, so please hold your questions. I will move on now to Dipendra Manocha, who's the managing trustee of the Saksham Trust and is the assistant project manager for the DAISY for All project. He's also the president of the DAISY Forum of India and the president of the National Association for the Blind Delhi State Branch. So we need two mics here for this. One is this one, and can you please turn on the other mic?
Very good evening, everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that for which the DAISY Consortium primarily came into existence, and which is the accessibility of the content, accessibility of publications, accessibility of documents for people who cannot read normal print. And people who cannot read normal print include people with blindness, low vision, illiterate, children with dyslexia, learning disabilities, people who cannot hold books because of the problems in disability of both the hands. If they cannot hold a book, they are also persons with print disabilities. And temporary print disability also comes for people who are actually driving a car. So these, how do we actually access the book? The digital book, the book that comes on, that can be read on your mobile devices, whether they are your mobile phones, tablets, computers. These publications are primarily the digital books. The digital book is the primary format which then can be distributed to the end users as Braille, as audio, or as large print. Or it can be actually be read directly on a mobile device by a person with print disability. So 4 different formats in which it can reach a person. Yeah, and these are Braille, audio, large print, or the e-text itself on a screen reader enabled mobile device. But the mother of all these 4 formats is primarily the digital book itself. We started using digital books almost 2 decades ago, or maybe 3 decades ago. With the advent of iPads and iPhone and the tablets, the world, the rest of the world, so-called the normal seeing persons without print disabilities, also started using digital books. So we now had equipment like Kindle, iBooks, etc., which where the mainstream industry had started adopting the digital books. The challenge now when we said was that earlier to the Kindle or the iBooks, we had to republish the books in digital format. Books would be released as a hard copy book on paper, and organizations would need to convert these into digital format for making them accessible. With the mainstream adopting the digital books, our task, obviously our strategy changed, and we said, why should we republish? Why cannot the universal design principle be adopted in the mainstream digital books? And this is how the standards came into play, where all the knowledge that the blindness community had gathered together for making a digital book, accessible digital book, was transferred to the mainstream industry, and it became the EPUB books. The accessible EPUB book was all the wisdom and the knowledge created by the blindness community for the digital books being adopted by the mainstream industry. So it was the DAISY Consortium which primarily developed these standards, which were adopted by the International Digital Publishers Forum, IDPF, which is the body that has created the EPUB standards for digital books. So even if you buy a Kindle book, you might not see the EPUB.EPUB written on it, but under the hood, in the background, even the Amazon would ask publishers to submit their books in EPUB format so that they could be included in the Amazon bookstore.
Delivered the address. However, he knew the US Congress speech was a historic foreign policy statement to an important audience. His listeners were the very congressmen and women who would have to give their vote of approval to the new bill he was seeking to strike.
So what you heard here was the e-text book which I was playing on my iOS device. And what I've done is that I've simply gone on to the Amazon.in website, purchased this book and loaded it on my iOS device and started reading it. This is no less than a revolution for us, actually. The day this technology became available, suddenly the number of books that I could read jumped from few hundred to almost 1.8 million. Republish it, convert it, spend maybe 10,000 rupees just on the conversion or 20,000 rupees on conversion, and then start and then get a chance to read it. And this would happen to less than 1% of the published materials. Now, the good things in this almost ends at some things, because when it comes to developing countries, I guess you can imagine that an iOS device is a luxury. It's not something that everybody in developing countries, where 90% of persons with print disabilities reside, can actually afford such a device. If I talk of an alternative of a smartphone, it might be an Android phone. But what happens if I shift to an Android phone? And what happens when I shift from English to local language? Is this revolution still available if I make these two changes? Shift to a low-cost smartphone, an Android phone, and shift from English to an Indian language. What happens to it? I just would like to demonstrate that. So we are seeing this change that the voice quality has gone down. It's hardly understandable. And this technology is working for Hindi, but not for many more Indian languages. So the choice of languages on this becomes almost negligible, and the voice quality of the technology has gone down considerably. And for many languages for developing countries, even this basic technology of speech may not exist. And the challenge also is that when we shift to the Indian languages, is that the font which is used is actually a non-standard font in most of the publications. So if I go to a website of any, say, education board of the country, where they have put up the digital files of the books on the website for anybody to download, if it is in Indian languages, 99 out of 100 times it would be published in a font which is a non-standard Indian language font, which means my assistive technology would not be able to read even this much what it was reading right now. The whole technology would fail. So, and the format also would not be EPUB. So unless, what I'm actually saying is that there are two major key standards that need to be followed. And I would say that these are the two keywords when it comes to creating content in our language, especially the content which is non-English local language content. The first one is the format should be an EPUB, an accessible EPUB format, and the font should be compliant to Unicode. So these are key words for us, EPUB and Unicode. Most of the public documents, publications are currently not there right now. So there is a lot of work for us that if we want the content there on the internet to be useful for persons with disabilities, these need to be adhering to these accessibility standards or mainstream standards actually, which allow accessibility to be built into them. And the third one is
much Dipendra for that presentation. We have learned a lot regarding the issues that are currently being faced. I can imagine the frustration when you move into the Indian languages because of the lack of standardization on some of these. The good news, of course, is that there is a lot of work now being done for standardization, and some of these technology gaps are now in the process of being filled. So we hope that these efforts will bear fruit maybe over the next 2 or 3 years, and that some of these pain points will be eased. So we now move on to Sunil. I'm not going to introduce Sunil, he's well known to all of you.
Thanks, Satish. You heard from Manocha, Dipendra Manocha, about the book famine. It is estimated that if you are a visually impaired person in the developed world, then you may have access to, say, 1 or 0.5% of all the books that are available to those without that particular disability. If you are a similar person in India or some other part of the developing world, then that percentage goes dramatically south, and you'll be fortunate if you have access to 0.001% of all the books available to those who don't have print-related disabilities. If this forum is filled with fans of the multi-stakeholder model, and if this forum is filled with what I might call ITU betas, those who vehemently protested wicked, the so-called ITU takeover of the internet, then if you want to end the book famine, you should call for the death of the World Intellectual Property Organization. After all, that is a multilateral forum, and we don't want multilateralism. We should repeal all the global intellectual property treaties, which are hard law, developed at this multilateral forum. And once that is the case, once there is no more international copyright law, the global knowledge will be available to the disabled. Of course, nobody is going to encourage me to continue with that line of argumentation. Even the most fanatic fan of the multi-stakeholder model, even the most rabid critic of the ITU will not want to dismantle international copyright law. So let us take another tack. In India, when the Copyright Act was amended in 2012, we introduced a disability neutral and a works neutral exception to copyright. So it didn't matter what your disability was, and it didn't matter what the copyrighted work was, whether it was a software, music, a movie, book, etc. As long as you can demonstrate that your disability prevents you from fully enjoying that copyrighted work, you had a right under the law to make an accessible version of the work and use it yourself, and also distribute it amongst similar disabled persons on a non-profit basis without asking for permission from the rights holder or giving any royalty to the rights holder. Of course, the WIPO is not as radical and as progressive as the Indian government. They came up with the Marrakesh Treaty, very similar. It was almost as if Indian policy best practice was exported to the international multilateral fora. And the Marrakesh Treaty does roughly the same thing, but it is not disability neutral and it is not works neutral. It only applies to books, doesn't apply to any other copyrighted work, and it only deals with the needs of the print disabled. Those are people with visual impairment and other similar or related impairments that prevent them from holding and turning the pages of physical or electronic books. So the IGF movement, as Paul Wilson called it this morning, if it were truly concerned about the rights of the disabled, would work day and night extra hard in the implementation of a multilateral treaty, the Marrakesh Treaty, to ensure that the book famine is ended once in for all. So that is what I would call upon this forum to take on as an immediate task. Mr. Manocha, of course, is a very humble and unassuming man, and he doesn't talk about all the wonderful things that he has done. So I will talk about one project where we have the privilege of working with Mr. Manocha. This is a project funded by Hans Foundation, and we are working under his leadership, under Mr. Manocha's leadership, to build support for 16 Indic languages in a free software TTS called eSpeak, and we're also working extra hard to squash some bugs that are currently noticed on a free software screen reader called NVDA. NVDA, of course, won't work on a phone, but eSpeak will, and in which we get things wrong. If you go to the DAITY website, the Department for Information Electronics Technology, and you try to access this very same policy document, the National Electronic Accessibility Policy, it is not accessible. Because the policy was born digital, then it was printed, then the Secretary signed and sealed the document, then it was scanned, converted into a PDF, and uploaded onto the website. So, e-governance, which is the primary mode today for those who are disabled to access and participate in government, to be full citizens, has many concerns when it comes to accessibility. The case study I gave of the inaccessible policy document is just one of the many challenges. So apart from the software that Mr. Manocha alluded to, apart from the standards that he stressed upon, there are many other human challenges before our information society becomes fully welcoming to those with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil, for that very nuanced presentation. These are some of the factors that often get missed out. The discourse on computing for the differently abled. Now, I'll spend a couple of minutes on the experience that my organization and my state of Kerala have had with computing for the differently abled. We started our computing for the differently abled project about 4 years back. It's called Insight, and it is basically a free software end-to-end stack for the visually impaired, which basically means that you start with a bare machine, brand new, without anything on it, and you install, and then you configure, and then you get working, and the entire thing is enabled even for a blind person. That has been kind of accepted by the government, and it's now being rolled out to the villages. Now, since it is at least customized heavily locally, because it is an open source platform, we have been able to make it do things that were not originally intended. That extension, of course, is therefore very important. We also have a number of other programs that are being kind of rolled out for disabled, for example, audio, not books, but audio magazines, which are basically current affairs, kind of information which gets to them. The interesting thing is that many of these can, as Dipendra already said, can be also used by the sighted people, not only exclusively for the blind people. And I'd like to highlight the case of one blind programmer who has actually been developing a lot of software for us. He is based out of Bombay. His name is Kant, and he is a programmer and a project leader of a team of programmers. And they've been designing and building software. A particular software that is being used in India for called which has been a big gap in the free software world because of the monopoly of a proprietary product in that space. And the free software community had no solution to that gap till this particular product from Krishnakant came out. I can vouch for this product because my organization, which is a government organization, has been using this product for the last 3 years for all our financial accounting. Now, the interesting part is that when I shared this information with the government of Kerala, they said, can this person then design a software for the government? And we said, why not? So, just last month, the government of Kerala has announced that it will go ahead with a kind of extended version of this software for the government purpose. And the point is that this is still being led by a blind programmer although most members of his team are sighted. Now, there's also a lot of effort now being taken. Yesterday, I was speaking to someone from the Leonard Cheshire International, which is in INGO, working with the disabled as well. And their main focus is to equip the blind youth to get jobs in some of the sectors such as IT, because IT is held in very high esteem in India. So they have been working on this, and they are looking for technologies that will enable quick training of this community, so that they can be kind of elevated to a level where they can take up these jobs. So some things are being done, but there are still many gaps, and therefore it is kind of, the onus is upon us as programmers, as developers, as leaders of these communities to deliver, as Arun has been trying to, from his side, developing technological tools. That there is a need for interventions, and perhaps the government also needs to step in and support these interventions that are being carried out in the civil society. We will now open the floor to questions from the audience, if there are any questions, and then we will have a 1-minute wrap-up for each of the panelists. I see that Gunela has gone offline, but the other three, of course, are with us. So, are there any questions from the audience?
That's from JNU. I would like to know about any project is going on related to Indian Sign Language, particularly ICT intervention using sign language.
Namaskar. The sign language, there is an Indian sign language. Efforts for standardizing Indian sign language, although it's a challenge of what to call some exceptions. There is something called Indian sign language now. But the use of ICT. Namaskar, my name is Rosa. Kathmandu, Nepal. All the presentation, in the Gunela presentation also she talked about the access to internet provides the communication, employment, participation towards the people with disability. In our discussion, what we're talking, I really happy to know that there are lots of development towards the happen. But what about those people who have the traditional knowledge system but not modern knowledge? Those who don't read and write also, below the poverty level also. What is how to access them with this system also? As you give an example that IT level also we are providing, but why not in the traditional system also, in agriculture, other sectors, those who are carrying? Is there any progress? Or
I think the question is on documenting the practices and knowledge in a way that can be used by the able. Is that so?
What he is how can ICT get to A, people who are very poor, and B, who are illiterate and who basically are only able to understand the spoken speech rather than. Well, as it happens, problems of persons with illiteracy are in some ways similar to the problems of persons with low vision, and that is that you have a difficulty with printed text. So to the extent that software becomes accessible to blind people, that books become accessible to blind people, they also become accessible to persons who are illiterate. As far as cost and so on, money is concerned, that problem is not going away. However, technology is becoming a lot cheaper. So the hardware at least is becoming increasingly affordable. In villages, you find people now increasingly smartphones. The problem of the software remains, and that is where open source software, free open source software has a major role to play in trying to reduce the overall cost of these technologies. The hardware is no longer the limiting factor, it is much more the software. And I think a lot of the discussion in the previous session was also related to that, and I'm sure that discussion will go on, but perhaps that's
online participants. Okay, for the PA people, we are going to have now 1 minute. Then Gunela, come online. After the PA, she's going to be prepared. What are you coming up with? Sum up your thoughts.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm hoping this will work well.
I think there are a range of other technologies that are also key, and it seems that in India and in many parts of the Asia-Pacific, language compounds the accessibility challenge. The technologies we need are optical character recognition and machine translation. If possible, we also need speech to text, not just text to speech. And given that we are a very proud people and we don't want to give up our scripts, we don't want to sacrifice our linguistic diversity, cracking the accessibility problem in this region is compounded by the linguistic diversity. So it truly makes things difficult, and since the private sector does not see a feasible market, it is up to the government to invest large amounts of money to ensure that this critical infrastructure is available. Thank you.
So, just touching upon the two points for the last. Hello, Scott. Come back. So the 2 points here. The first one, what a friend from Nepal actually said about the traditional knowledge to be saved, and also the knowledge to reach out to people who cannot read normal print. Audio, of course, is a very powerful medium which we as blindness community has been using, and like with other digital text, we've actually developed this technology to an extent which is extremely good for such kind of documentation and books to be, or useful materials to be, first of all, created in an audio format in a structured way, and to listen to it. And we do have a lot of open source tools and know-how how to actually capture and disseminate this knowledge to the target group that you were mentioning. So I think there is a big opportunity here of convergence of these two different diverse stakeholders to make use of this technology. The second part which I would want to emphasize is that when it comes to the accessible print productions, there is a technology gap or something, but there is a whole ecosystem that needs to be in place. And even if a single component of that ecosystem is not there in place, the whole infrastructure or whole system of accessible information falls apart. And this ecosystem actually relates to production. A production of, we would we would prefer that the mainstream production itself creates books which are born accessible. Otherwise, let's at least make it in a way so that it can be reproduced easily in an accessible format. And the second component is the distribution network. How would it reach using the power of the internet to the person or people in all parts of the country, as remote as possible, but they should be able to get this content. And I feel the internet and internet technologies and softwares have a large role to play there. And the third one being the equipment and the assistive technology in the hands of the end users, which is compatible with the distribution system. And there, the smartphones and the apps and the text-to-speech systems, etc., have got a big role to play. We need to make all this work. Currently, there are gaps, and due to those gaps, although we seem that we are almost there, but because there are certain gaps in the whole ecosystem, the system actually breaks, and the majority of the people have got very little access to the real information.
There are two aspects that I would like to react to. One is the whole question of how do we deal with the multiplicity of languages in terms of accessibility. What we haven't talked about on this panel is the improvements that we are starting to see in automatic translation. Just as with speech to text, the progress in the last few years has been quite dramatic. And today I am able to, without fear, just demonstrate speech to text on a panel like this and be confident that it will work. I mean, this confidence I haven't had for more than a few months so far. A few years ago, speech recognition was headache. You needed to train the systems. You needed to, really it was hard work. But now they recognize Indian accents quite easily and so on. Similarly, with automatic translation, those of you who are using facilities on the internet may have noticed that it has become much easier now to carry on email communications with people who speak completely different languages. And yes, there are times when there are misunderstandings, but by and large it works quite well. Again, with Indian languages, we do not have that much progress, but it's only a matter of time. And that really also brings me to the second point. And that is that, as the Bible says, better than giving a person fish is to teach a person how to catch fish. One of the most rewarding experiences that I have had as a teacher is when, under the guidance of Dipendra Manocha, we ran a program teaching Visual Basic to blind people. And that was, the people who were part of that program were extremely motivated, and I think they've gone on to do extremely well. But there are very few such developers, as was also pointed out by Satish. I mean, people like Krishnakant are very, very rare, and we need to see a lot more of them. That is the best way to have accessible software and technologies, that in your development team, there should be disabled people. And as I mentioned, software development has become really, really easy now. In the West, there are huge movements to try and bring software writing literacy into the mainstream, particularly among women. And I believe that we need to extend that very, very forcefully into the community of persons with disabilities. That if they learn how to write software, first and foremost, the problem of accessible software will be reduced. The person will learn a very valuable skill, and the commitment of the person to that software will be for a lifetime, because that software is something that is improving your own life. I mean, as is the case with T.V. Raman, who wrote Emacs Speed. I mean, that is one of the most up-to-date softwares because he uses it.
Can we go on to Gunela, please?
Hello. Well, I'm hoping you can hear me. Can you just confirm that you can hear me, please? Excellent. Okay, I think you can. So I just want to say, look, I am delighted with all the knowledge that has been shared in this session from our panel of experts in disability and technology. And a couple of things I just wanted to raise. We heard about the EPUB standard, and that really arose from the disability community, meeting a very important need for people with print disability. And Dipendra talked about that in detail, and how that has actually now become a mainstream standard. And this is not only one example, there are others where, for example, the scanner was originally a tool for blind people to be able to access scanned material. And also voice recognition was a tool for people with physical disabilities, and this has now become a mainstream product. I won't go into more detail than that. But we heard from Sunil about what can the internet community do to try and improve the WIPO reforms. So I'm just looking at a lot of really interesting ideas that have come from this panel. We do not want to lose those. And I believe strongly that the internet community can work with some of these particular issues. And certainly, maybe we can look at setting up a regional scheme for promoting and training of young people with disabilities in software development. We've heard of programs like that already happening in India. Could we do this on a broader scale? And so I raise that challenge here at the APrIGF to see how we can move forwards with this. So thank you. And thank you for the speakers in coming here and sharing this with us. And I look forward to ongoing communication about some of the issues raised today. Thank you.
As we close, I'd just like to mention that the technologies for the disabled are always one step behind the mainstream technologies. Sometimes this can be a problem. Right now, in ICANN, we're getting into IDNs, internationalized domain names. When this happens, you're going to have a problem that people are going to compose email IDs in non-Roman scripts. That might pose a problem to our users in India. Their screen readers may not be capable of rendering such scripts. So we have lots more work to do in order to ensure that we are able to keep pace with the development. I have one comment from an online participant, Uli McPhee, who says, just thank the speakers for a very interesting and valuable presentation. On behalf of the organizers, Gunela and I'd like to thank all the participants, Gunela, Dipendra, Arun, and Sunil. Also apologize for the initial glitch. It took us some time to get started, but it's good to know that it's been resolved now. So sessions tomorrow and day after will not have this problem. So in that sense, we have made a contribution to the general good. So thanks also to the audience who have been here, who have raised questions. So once again, and hoping that this work will continue, and all these people are veterans, and that the work will continue for the future. We are signing off. Thank you.